Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our first story takes us back to a different era where a company's rigid expense policy turned what should have been a straightforward secondment into a game of loopholes and unexpected rewards. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. The finance rule that bought me a TVR. This took place in a different century, a long time ago. I was employed by a big international company that had several locations in the UK. I was dispatched on a 6-month secondment to main office in London, even though my regular base was, say, York. Everything was paid for, in particular the rail transportation to and from London on Monday mornings and Friday evenings, the hotels during the week, and the evening dinners. I was living in digs in York at the time, and they charged me for the number of nights I actually stayed there. As a result, I saved money by returning home most weekends and staying with my parents in Reading, which is closer to London than York. Since I was in Reading practically every weekend, I requested if I might drive straight to the London office from Reading rather than making the long drive to York, only to take the dreadful train back to London and vice versa on Fridays. Not surprisingly, my line manager approved of this. For the first 2 weeks, everything was going well until finance found out that another colleague on the secondment had been doing the same thing as me, but she was claiming to have taken the train to London from her parents' house in Edinburgh, which is much farther away from London than York. Due to the controversy over the company's subsidization of her weekend trips home to Scotland, an order was issued stating that, going forward, only rail travel claims from York to London would be approved. After discussing my situation with my line manager, he directed me straight to finance because, I believe, he was aware of what was going to happen and didn't want to be held accountable. I started to explain my situation to his senior manager in finance, but he abruptly interrupted and stated, in a tone that would not tolerate disagreement, that only claims from York-London would be approved, there would be no exceptions. As a callow young man, I understood the message, and while actually traveling from Reading to London, filed weekly cost claims for flexible return rail tickets from York to London for over 5 months. After the secondment ended, I was able to purchase a great used TVR automobile because to the unexpected amount of money I gained from this, plus the fact that I didn't have to pay for meals or accommodations. It's almost poetic how their refusal to listen led to the company paying you significantly more than they would have if they'd simply approved your direct route. 5 months of claims for York to London travel when you were really traveling a much shorter distance must have felt like a private little rebellion against red tape. And that TVR, the perfect symbol of how their rigid policies put you in the driver's seat. Literally. The irony is, had they simply been reasonable from the start, the company could have saved money. Instead, their refusal to accommodate a practical exception made them architects of their own loss. I hope every time you drove that car, you felt a little extra satisfaction knowing it was a reward for their short-sightedness. And our second story. How a stolen trailer led to the perfect sting operation. This story happened over 20 years ago when the internet was a newish thing and people weren't quite so savvy. It's kinda sorta revenge. Probably more a tale of a stupid, naive thief and a police force who were not hugely tech-savvy at the time. My then boss was heavily involved in motorsports, and when you have competition vehicles, you need a large car trailer to take them to events. He had a home-built trailer that was reasonably unique and identifiable, which he stored it outside his house. Then one day he found that it had been stolen during the night. So he did the normal thing of filing a police report and, after being angry, moving on and accepting it was probably gone for good. Except that he also kept an eye on TradeMe, our local eBay equivalent, on the off chance that the thief was stupid enough to list it there for sale. Couple of weeks later, what should pop up in the trailers for sale listings? His car trailer, repainted but still identifiable as his, right down to still having the original color paint visible around the coupling. The question was how to get it back. Off my boss went back to the police, who said, "Leave it with us. TradeMe will have to hand over his details." Except that TradeMe said no. that they only had his username and email address, so the police decided that the next best way to get the seller's details was to win the auction. An account was set up with TradeMe, bids were placed, and they led the bidding up until an hour before the auction closed. Remember I said this guy was stupid for selling stolen goods online? Perhaps he wasn't quite as dumb as I thought, as he smelt a rat and blocked the police account from the auction. And my boss couldn't bid on it as his location would be a dead giveaway. But my TradeMe account had a history on it of buying motorsport-related items, so it would be a natural for me to also buy a car trailer, so I placed a bid and won the auction. I'm told that when my boss contacted the police after the auction, they were pretty glum and didn't know how they were going to identify the seller or auction winner until my boss told them it was me who won the auction. I then made contact with the seller, managed to get him to agree to payment in cash and to give me a pickup address and time for the next day. Of course, it was the police who went to collect the trailer at their agreed time on my behalf, and a few hours later, the trailer was returned to my boss in a better condition than when it was taken. And the police were able to arrest not just the seller, but also an accomplice and recover a number of other stolen items from the property into the bargain. This story is a brilliant example of karma at work. The sheer arrogance of the thief stealing a unique car trailer and then listing it for sale online is almost laughable. Your boss's persistence in monitoring TradeMe was genius. And the way you stepped in as the secret weapon with your legit account? Perfect teamwork. The thief, thinking they'd outsmarted the police by blocking their accounts, just the cherry on top of their poor decisions. Watching the police not only retrieve the trailer, but also bust the thief and recover more stolen items is the kind of justice that's so satisfying to hear about. And your boss getting the trailer back in better condition? That's a great ending. And our last story. Karen versus the construction zone, a masterclass in parking fails. About a decade ago, I was working as the site foreman on a tricky hillside project. The house we were building sat 250 feet up a steep incline, accessible only by a narrow footpath. Every piece of material had to be hauled up by hand, which was exhausting on a good day. At the bottom of the hill were two spots designated as no parking delivery zone. These were critical for trucks bringing materials. Most people respected the signs, but occasionally someone would try their luck. Usually a quick explanation was enough to get them to move. And then there was Karen. One busy afternoon, I got a call from our lumber supplier. The truck loaded with beams for the roof framing was 2 minutes out. I headed down the hill to ensure the delivery spot was clear, but as I approached, I saw an idling SUV sitting squarely in one of the no parking spaces. The driver, Karen, was scrolling on her phone with the engine running. I tapped on her window, giving her my best "please don't make this a thing" smile. "Hi there, this is a delivery zone. We've got a truck arriving any second, so I'll need you to move." Karen, barely glancing up, "I'm just waiting for my kid. I'll be gone in 5 minutes." I pointed up the road. "There are plenty of other spots nearby. This one needs to stay clear." She rolled her eyes. "Your truck's not even here yet. Relax." Before I could respond, the delivery truck turned the corner, a massive flatbed carrying enough lumber to build a small fortress. Karen didn't budge. I gestured for the driver to pull in behind her, blocking her SUV in. Karen finally lowered her window, glaring. "What's your problem?" she snapped. "My problem is that you're parked in a no parking zone and now you're blocking our delivery." She huffed. "Can't your guy just unload around me? It's not rocket science." I took a deep breath. "All right, ma'am, let's try it your way." I turned to the truck driver and said, "Park as close as you can behind her, box her in tight." The driver grinned and maneuvered expertly, pinning her car between the truck and a stack of construction equipment. Meanwhile, I called parking enforcement, not to report Karen, but to ensure we weren't breaking any rules by blocking part of the street. As we started unloading the lumber, Karen's child arrived. That's when Karen realized the pickle she was in. She had to climb over her passenger seat to get out, practically falling out of the SUV. "Hey!" she yelled, marching toward me. "Move that damn truck right now." The driver didn't even look at her. "Sorry, ma'am, company policy says I can't move the truck with an unsecured load." "What kind of stupid rule is that?" "It's called safety," he replied flatly. Karen turned her rage on me. "You think you're so smart, don't you, blocking me in like this? I have somewhere to be." "Oh, I'm sure you do," I said with a smile. but you'll have to wait until we're done." Just as Karen was running out of insults, the parking officer arrived. As the officer got out of her car, I turned to Karen with a grin. "Can't you just pull out around it?" I asked, parroting her earlier suggestion. Karen's face turned beet red. "You're a real piece of work, you know that?" Instead of calming down, Karen stormed back to her SUV. She jumped in, revved the engine, and slammed it into reverse. The truck driver and I watched, stunned, as she backed straight into a porta potty, knocking it over. The foul smell wafted through the air, but Karen wasn't done. She threw the car into drive, mounted the curb, and attempted to drive around the truck. Her SUV got stuck halfway over the curb, wheels spinning uselessly. The parking officer, now thoroughly unimpressed, marched up to Karen's window. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Karen yelled something incoherent but stayed put. The officer had no choice but to open the door and haul her out. As Karen sat on the curb, handcuffed and screaming about her rights, the officer explained her charges: reckless driving, destruction of property, RIP porta potty, and driving with a suspended license. Meanwhile, the lumber truck driver and I finished unloading. As I handed over my report to a second officer, I couldn't help but glance back at Karen. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before parking in a no-parking zone," I said. She shot me a glare that could have melted steel, but I just walked away. Karen's car was towed, her kid was picked up by a relative, and she spent the night in jail. The story became a running joke on the site, and I made sure to remind the crew, if somebody tells you to pull out around a truck, maybe don't take it literally. As for Karen, I never saw her again. But I like to think she remembers the day she tried to outsmart a foreman and lost spectacularly. What a masterpiece of chaotic karma. Karen's audacity to park in a clearly marked no parking zone was bold enough, but the chain of events that followed, absolutely legendary. You handled it with just the right amount of let the consequences do the talking. Boxer in tight? Genius. Watching her spiral from smug defiance to full-blown meltdown was like witnessing a live-action cautionary tale. Her reckless decision to take on a lumber truck and a seasoned foreman earned her not just a ticket, but a one-way trip to public humiliation and legal trouble. Here's hoping Karen learned her lesson, though based on her grand exit, I wouldn't hold my breath. At least you and your crew got a story to laugh about for years to come. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.